point.
Quiet down. Yeah. Want to sit down, please? Thank you. I need a motion. Calling order the meeting for September 9th, 2018 for the Water Negotiations VDOE Commission meeting. I need a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda. It's September 8th, by the way.
I'm going to do it. I'll second that. How do you vote? Yes. Everybody got a copy of the agenda? There's a package. I'm going to do the introduction, please. Chuck Burns from Devon King. Ralph, another commissioner. Rick Sorenka from DES. Ian Hayes, the water. He's our water operator, and Nancy's on the end. My name's Mike Smith. I'm chairman of the board. So I want to set the ground so that we're all here. Simple. Raise your hand. You'll be acknowledged. Only one person talks at a time. All right? Stay focused on the issue. If you're going to talk, if you're going to bring up something that's not on that thing, I'm not going to acknowledge you, and I won't acknowledge you for the rest of that agenda item. All right? So let's stay focused on it so we can get through this. I'd like to get us in here, get us out by noontime if we can. This 2-hour meeting. We're going to talk. We're going to open it up. We're going to discuss it. Then we're going to take all questions and have answers for you. All right? Does everybody understand so that we're not going through this again?
Is this going to be by topic? In other words, you're going to cover the first topic
Yes.
and then have questions?
That's what it said.
Thank you.
And we're going to stay focused on that one topic all the way through. All right? We're going to start on the pressure reducing valve. And this was brought up at the annual meeting. We brought them up, and there was numerous calls. They got defeated. There was numerous calls to the state that came back to the commissioners, that the commissioners were getting even with the public because we couldn't address them. When it was voted down at the annual meeting, no means no. We can't do anything on it. And that's what people didn't understand. So I'd like to have Rick talk about this, because Rick ended up with all the calls. So there was 5 or 6 calls that I know that we got emails back to the office.
Yeah, just to let you know, my name is Rick Sorenka. I work for the Department of Environmental Services in the Drinking Water Groundwater Bureau, and I'm the engineer responsible for Village District of VDOE from a regulatory standpoint under the Safe Drinking Water Act. I'm familiar with the district, quite familiar. Been engaged with the district for years. You know, the first thing I'd like to say in general is that I think there's got to be a lot of issues talked about today, and I'm, you know, hopefully we don't get into designing anything and talking about the specific design. But I think what's more important is that the commissioners here understand, and you understand, the same message of, okay, this is the issue, and this is how we're going to go forward addressing the issue. And the first issue that come up is the high pressure in homes. You know, this is a very unusual water system that you have here. There's 7 different pressure zones. In other words, you have to get the water down the bottom of the hill up to the top of the hill. If you did it all with one straight pipe, the people down at the bottom hill would have probably about 300 pounds of pressure. So what happens is you lift the water up to an intermediate point, then you lift it again, and then you keep lifting it, you know, as you go up the mountain. And as a result, some people incurred high water pressures on a normal basis at their homes. So that's an issue that I think the commissioners, as a whole, will need, needs to address. You know, it's not a quick fix, and it's not, you know, one specific area. Ian mentioned that there's other homes. I know some on Oak Ridge. You know, there's some areas that have high pressure, but in other parts of the system, I'm sure there's people that have pressure just as high, if not higher. The way to prevent this, or protect the home is with the residential pressure reducing valves, which I'm sure hopefully everyone has one in their home. Now the question comes is, well, who's responsible for that? I will tell you that Pennachuck Water, which is a large water utility across the state, they actually have every homeowner sign a waiver, and it's a legal document assigned to the property acknowledging that there is a pressure reducing valve and that the homeowner is responsible for that, and that they acknowledge there is pressure greater than 85 or 90 pounds being provided to that home. That is not, I don't think that's been done here.
No.
I'm not proposing that it's being done here, but I think the first thing is to establish that that's the first safety valve for homes, having the pressure reducing valves. I don't know, but another way of lessening the impact is with pressure reducing valves in the main that's owned by the district. And that's something that there are some pressure reducing valves in the existing system, and there's been a proposal to address this high pressures with pressure reducing valves. Again, I don't want to get into, well, what street is it on, whose home is it above or below. That shouldn't be the issue here today, okay? And if there's an engineer consultant they've hired to recommend some plan, then to me that, I haven't seen the specific plan, but that is what how they're addressing it. To me, that's something that I think should be supported. Okay, and again, I don't know. I don't want to go back to what happened in the past. I know there was a proposal at the last annual meeting. I wasn't there, and I'm not sure we want to go visit that. But the concept here is that this needs to be addressed on a system-wide basis. What street is addressed first? That's really going to be up to the commissioners, and it's not going to be DES decisions. Hopefully they get input from residents, hopefully input from Ian, and input from the engineer, and then they can make a valid, informed decision. I guess that, and so at this point, this is a capital improvement. So in order to borrow money, that has to be voted on at the annual meeting with the bond vote. And so that can't happen until, I believe, next year. And again, you can call special meetings, but those are very difficult to petition through the courts, and there has to be a real specific reason for that. But I don't know. The cost, I believe, is fairly extensive, and I don't think can come out of operating budget. But again, these are details that I'm not really engaged with. Mike, any I guess, what's the proposal now for this?
So last year we proposed two PRV grids, one at DPW and one Upper Lakeview. That would be proposed again this year because we haven't corrected the problem. We have a laundry list of items that need to be addressed. That laundry list, because a lot of them got voted down, is still there for this year, and it has to be addressed going forward. There's, I think, 7 pits that total that we had talked about doing.
How many are there now?
I think there's 7 pits.
7 pressure reducing valves?
Yeah.
And
4.
There are 4?
Right now.
Okay, and proposing to add?
We'd have to go through it, but we would be rehabbing the existing ones with a larger structure to make it easier to get into, to add additional PRVs and meters in every one of the pits. And then we were going to look at other locations, and probably, I think our goal was to end up with 7. So we had a few other zones that we wanted to, over the next few years, add pits to as well.
And the existing pressure reducing pits, I'm sure it's since the 1970s?
Probably.
And access to it is not confined space. Very difficult to get in those. So that's another thing, that you have existing infrastructure that has to be upgraded. So there's not only existing, but there's also new pressure reducing valves that they're looking at too.
What we looked at including a new valve for access in and out. and then the PRVs, meters, and everything else for leak protection.
Yeah, we're going to be adding a large body and a small body PRV to handle the different flows, and
Okay.
adding a meter just to help us start to gauge where our water's going.
Yeah. I guess at this point, I mean, I'd take questions,
Right.
comments.
Questions? Go ahead.
Hi, my name is John Lynch. I own a house. My wife and I have own property on Portage View off of Oak Ridge. Rick, you and I had a conversation, I believe it was the end of May, in regards to high pressure.
Yeah.
Pressure's been, right now, last night it was at 130 pounds. It's been, the highest I've ever seen is 178. Ian, you know the situation.
I do.
Have hot water, have the pressure relief valve on the hot water tank dripping, well, of course, when the pressure's that high. We've been here 44 years, never had a problem. We do have a PRV. I changed it back in June, was a recommendation of Ian and the commissioners. The pressure's still blowing by it. Again, last night the water was dripping from the hot water tank. I have neighbors that have had the same problem. I have a neighbor that's put in a couple of heating systems. The pressure's too high, Rick. We've never had, in 44 years, I've never had this problem. You know, the PRV that's in the ground right now, I understand it's quite old, and Ian and we've had conversations, I'm sure with he's had it with the commissioners. We talked about it, and he said, all he had to do was replace the existing PRV. In fact, I thought he had said that he had ordered it. You had told me you were ordering it, and it came in, and he had it. And you know, it was he said it was going to be a couple $1,000s. You know, I think it's a good place to start. You know, the pressure is just too high. You know what I'm saying? It's like I say, I've seen it as high as 178 pounds.
So, I never said that just replacing the PRV would fix the problem, because
Well, you made the comment that that might be the way to go.
when we first started talking about it,
Correct.
yeah, there's multiple options, and obviously we've been doing pressure mapping in that area to try to determine how effective that PRV is, because again, I think it's important, and this is, I'll let Nancy, as one of the commissioners, kind of talk to, go ahead.
Can I just say
Yep.
one more thing,
Yep.
Ian? This pressure, we usually get high pressure late at night when nobody's using the water. If we leave a faucet trickling, the pressure won't go up. But and it's late at night, it's usually 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning. And that's when you'll hear the water dripping, because that's in our utility room. But usually, it's never gone that high during the day. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, that's fine. I think like Rick said, we'll try not to get into too many specifics on it, just to keep it moving. But just so you know, we do have, obviously, in a lot of different areas, high pressure. We've done the calculation on the gravity, and you know, there's some question as to whether or not maybe your gauge is working properly, just because we've seen peak outs, and we can't produce 180 psi out of that line. So it's just not, because it's a gravity line. There's no pump on it. So what's creating that, I don't know, but you know, we've talked about getting another pressure map off your house, and
Right.
we can move forward with doing that. But you know, as Rick said, we do have a PRV that, from the mapping that we have, is working. Now, it's a large body PRV, so in order to catch these low flows at night, we're always going to struggle with that until we put in a new PRV. Now, again, I'll let the commissioners and Nancy answer to how the funding works on where we can spend money and how when something gets voted down in a meeting, because that's not my area. But from what I understand, as long as this is a non-emergency item, because it got voted down, we cannot expend money on it. So this brings us to, as Rick mentioned, you know, having an operational PRV in the home. The same way that we want an operational PRV in the road, we want an operational PRV in the home. Because even if we were to ideally get pressure, you're probably aware that we have the Upper Lakeview. We're feeding your house and a line much higher than yours off the same PRV that we need to produce, you know, minimum of 35 and ideally more than that for these homeowners on Upper Lakeview. So we're limited in what we can cut the pressure back to begin with. So you're always going to have pressure minimum in the 100 range. So, you know, the inside PRV needs to be operational, and that's, we've talked about it. I think what happened is you had a good model PRV that worked for you for a long time. It failed, and you put a new one in that's not working, and you know.
It's the exact same one. And why does it work during the day and not at night?
Well,
Why is it blowing by?
yeah. Well, here's...
Let's keep it out of the specifics. I mean, this
Okay.
is your issue.
But I think it's important to talk about some of the things I think about. Is that, one, is there anything, that can be done to reduce the pressure that's, without a capital expense? Okay, the first thing is it, all right? The first thing is that what's being proposed by the commission is that going to address
Yes.
this issue?
Yes.
Okay, so that's important to hear, okay? But it may not happen until there's...
February's meeting.
Okay, right, okay. Second thing is so, I hate to say this, but maybe if you have to crack a faucet, I'm saying this,
We have done that at night. I mean,
And-
again, it's usually when nobody's here, that's when it's...
yeah, and so that might
You
be...
mentioned you might run a bleeder, and I don't think we really talked about it again, but...
That might be a solution, because granted, it should be a short term. I don't encourage people to waste water, but if it's going to alleviate a major safety issue, then maybe that's a solution, all right? And so, again, this is a thing I think needs to be discussed, because it's not maybe only your site, but maybe others too.
The bottom 5, 6 houses on that zone, which he's probably, from that zone, from his home down, those homes are all hitting about 130 psi.
So here's the next thing I think to mention is it I know maybe is it long term, is it worth it to reroute their service lines to
No.
Yeah,
unfortunately we can't,
No.
to the different main. That was something that they addressed probably 10 years ago, trying to do it off a different main. That
different
was-
pressure
had
zones,
lower
so less
real
pressure
low,
zones.
right.
Yeah,
It was significantly lower. You're going to be dealing with, I think, too low of pressure,
Yeah.
like in the low 30s, high 20s, something like that. So.
And another thing, it's just last thing to throw out there too. So we're relying on a single pressure reducing valve there.
So
Okay, does it make sense to put two?
That's what the plan
two in
that
line?
we addressed for that one was to add two PRVs, one for the upper road, one for the lower road. All
No,
in the same
I'm
lot,
saying in the home.
for him to put in a backup PRV.
Yeah.
Or Y
Primary,
street.
secondary.
Right. Does that make sense to do it on a temporary basis?
I just have one quick question. Do we have the PIV that goes in that pit?
Yes, we already own that.
All right, and just one more, and that would be my last one. On the warrant article, was that to add new pits, or was that to replace that valve? Was that part, I wasn't there, so I don't know.
And
Add new pits?
to replace the valve.
Well,
Go
I
through the
mean,
whole thing.
just a
No, there was no specific item for replacing that valve. It was for, I mean,
It was for the upgrade of the
right, we
pit.
would have been replacing the valve and the upgrade of the pit, but there was not a separate project listed for replacing the valve.
I mean, to replace the valve, what are we talking thousands, 2,000, 5,000, 10,000? Are we talking that kind of money, or are we talking hundreds of dollars?
$500 is all.
No, off the top of my head, I don't have the number, John.
The other
but
thing, John,
You're not talking,
if you're going to do something, you want to do it once and you do it right.
Correct.
So it's it's been there since 1970s. More than likely, you're going to have to rebuild the pit. It's kind of like if you're going to renovate your house, the electrical probably has to be upgraded. Once you get into it, the kind of whole thing snowballs. And if you're going to do it once and do it right. That's what my recommendation.
I know what you're asking, John. Can we get in there and get this done in a half day
Yeah.
for $400 in material? And unfortunately, so these pits are only about 28 inches wide. Whether or not we can plop it in place without expending a lot more money, we may end up having to excavate the outside of the valve, the pit, shut the system down, drain it down, and then replace the piping going into it. It's not a guarantee that we would or would not have to do that. It's just certainly a possibility. So now we're talking about a day and a half project.
Well, the way I look at it is, I was asked to replace my PRV, which I
Sure.
had no problem
Sure.
doing. I replaced it with exactly the same one I took out.
Yep.
It was a Watts pressure regulator, and I've done my part, and as long as it's not a major expense, I would think the village district would step up and at least change it. And if it doesn't work, you still have a good one.
That's a good point.
I think it's worth a try.
Yeah. I think so too. I think they should look into it. Okay. And because it's not just yours, but there's other homes that.
Yeah,
would be
there's a
addressed,
bunch
too.
of other homes that have
Yeah.
a problem.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, my name is Jay Buckley, and I wanted to talk about this particular issue with respect to the warrant article. No meaning no. I'm going to read the warrant article so everybody understands what it said at the annual meeting. To see if the district will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $32,700 for the purpose of updating and installing new PRB pits with meters at Upper Lakeview and DPW for the water system. Didn't say anything, as Ian just reiterated, about the valves that currently exist. So I know John was the first one to notice this problem, and he notified me, and Ian knows this very well and sometimes uses my house as a gauge of measuring the street pressure, because I have a gauge on the street side. So when I went and took a look at my gauge in my house to see what the street pressure was, I was actually surprised to see how high it was. Now, my gauge is a $10 gauge from Home Depot. Certainly not calibrated, but it's an indication from what I used to see on that gauge. The pressure has risen about 25 to 32 pounds over time, over this past, I guess, 15 months. So I'm concerned that the existing pressure reducing valve device at the bottom of this 28-inch diameter pit is not functioning as it was for the past 14, 15 years. So it's wearing, just like a lot of our devices. I'm worried about not only the internal plumbing in John's house as well as my own, but my other neighbors. More so the older homes, because I know one of my neighbors directly across from my street has a service line which goes from the water main into his house. It's rated for 80 psi. He's seeing right now, as Ian indicated, maybe 130. So that's an old line. It's 40 years old. I hate to see that pressure underneath this driveway. So I'm just wondering if you have the device, if the simple replacement of it could carry us safely to February. I don't disagree with putting in larger pits. I mean, he's a big guy. I can't say I'm sorry, I didn't mean it wrong, but
I won't take that personally.
yeah. I know, he's a big guy for getting into a 28-inch pit.
Everybody's a big guy.
Yeah.
I got a 16-year-old son small enough to stuff it.
But if we could just somehow remediate the issue now so that we don't have a catastrophe in any one of these older homes till we get to February. And then if we're given the details in the warrant article as to what it was going to do, meters, multiple PRBs, I think you'd get an approval on that. That's my only point.
Young lady.
And I hope you'll forgive me if I speak and run. I hope you'll forgive me if I speak and run. I can't stay further than this. I just wanted to second John Lynch's suggestion that a fix, even if it's a temporary one, be done sooner rather than later. We're next door neighbors. We're at 49 Oak Ridge Road. And at the end of we're seasonal residents. Before we left last fall, we put in a brand new Bosch boiler and water heater. And when the water was turned on this summer, the pump on that brand new machine broke. And we were 3 weeks without hot water. And even that, and a new pump was finally put in. Even now we can't turn the heat on, and we're going to start needing it soon, because the copper tubing that runs from the boiler to where it would heat the floorboards leaks so heavily that we've already filled 2 very big kind of lobster pots under the boiler, so we keep the heat turned off for that reason. And also, we had to replace the, I don't know what you call it, forgive me, but the intake valve on 3 Porridge View Place, which we also own, because when the water was turned on, the crawl space was flooded, and Scott Winter, a plumber, came in and diagnosed that the pipe had blown and put in a whole new valve and pipe. We do have new plumbing in both places, including new pressure release valve, PRBs in both houses. We had those put in last summer.
Important thing, yeah, for everybody.
And,
so one of the things it doesn't, but is any plumber that is working in these houses should be aware and should be using material that meets the high pressure standards. And that's an important thing for them to be aware of.
Now, Scott Winter is very expert and very
yeah.
this issue.
Just to, and you guys know that we want to address this problem, but the indoor PRV, just like anything, any mechanical device, there are different grades of material, and that's what he's talking about with a high pressure PRV, or at least to that degree, some length. You can get better PRVs, because if you have I know that, John, you've replaced yours recently. I just had a guy down on in the last few months put one in down on off Middle Shore somewhere. Anyway, immediately on putting it in, it didn't work. It's.
Is there like a brand that?
These are the
several
BoC.
brands
This is
that
a pretty.
you
It's
know?
a pretty standard valve that almost everybody uses. I don't know if it's sediment in the lines that are clogging the diaphragms, or if it's just, as we all know, they don't make things like they used to, type of thing. But they're not as resilient as they once were. There's no doubt about it. I've had multiple failures on brand new PRV valves, so it is frustrating from you guys' point of view to be putting in a new piece of equipment and have it not working. But with a proper PRV, 3/4 inch or 1 inch PRV, you're going to get that pressure below 75 psi in your home. It's virtually now that's not going to protect from the street to the home, right? That if there's 80 psi water lines, or if there's other fittings coming into the home, that is not going to protect that. I don't know if there's anybody in this room that's had to deal with a broken water main yet, water line yet, service line, but that is something that's owned by the customer from curb valve to home. And there are a lot of 80 psi lines out here, and that's what we typically find when we find leaks are 80 or 100 psi water lines. So I think that it's important to, when we go full circle on this thing, that we've been doing pressure mapping to kind of decide whether or not this PRV is working properly, right? And from everything I can find on a 2-inch PRV body, it's working. Now, whether or not we can expend funds to change that PRV to a new one, I don't know. So, but
Go ahead.
At the end of
to
the-
make sure she gets
Yeah,
is able to say everything she wants to say.
What seems to me is that if all of the neighbors in a certain cluster are having broken boilers, broken PRVs, broken intake pipes, whatever they're called, and especially since all our equipment was new, it just doesn't seem logical that our problem is we all have defective PRVs, as opposed to whatever's happening with the system PRV isn't sufficient to protect us all.
If pressure's going over 75 psi in your house, then the PRV in your house isn't working. Whether or not our street PRV is working, that one also is not working. So I'm not trying to, this is a system-wide issue.
Provocation for it's not working, I think, is an influx of much too high water pressure.
But this is again why we are trying to address it with new pits. This is what we are trying to accomplish, is to get new equipment in.
I'm not arguing with you. All I'm saying is, from our perspective, so we can turn our heat on, the sooner would be much better.
Sure. And I think
Can I
that's.
say something here? I have 145 pounds coming into my house. I have a PRV that's been in there for years. It's about 68 pounds. I think the quality of the PRV is what's the problem here. The old ones are probably better. Mine's probably 8, 9 years old. I think you might want to go see what one your plumber put in. Is it a good quality one? Good brand name is also.
What's better than Watts?
Watts is a good brand name.
It sure is.
You
I
know-
was down.
Can I say something?
Okay, go
They
ahead.
make a primary secondary one too.
Now, do you have a gauge before your
I get gauges at PS.
before your pressure regulator?
Yes. That's why I told you 145 pounds. I'm on the
That's
bottom,
too much
I'm
pressure.
on the bottom, on the pond.
I mean, that's too much pressure, Mike. Would you agree?
Yes.
And I live with
Kind
that.
of pressure.
And I just want to say one real quick thing. I mean, we haven't, 43 years, Mike, we've never had the problem. You suggest change the PRV, I change it. It's doing the same thing, it's blowing right by it.
It sounds like to me, our PRV is leaking by a little bit.
The one in the ground.
In the ground.
Yeah, I agree.
That's what it
Nobody
sounds
uses
like to me.
I
could be wrong.
think this is an important forum, for them to hear, and then hope they can take that information and then react to that. And to say, we've been here for 43 years or whatever, things are changing. The infrastructure's aging, we're aging. At some point, we're all going to have to be, it all has to be replaced. So I think it's a good. I'd like to hear. Young lady, are you done talking, or you want to keep, you have
Yes,
something?
thank you. I just want to reiterate that if there is even a temporary fix,
Sure.
it can be done now with the systems PRV.
Yeah.
we'd all much appreciate it, because we had newborn twins staying with us for the month, and for 3 weeks we had no hot water for them on account of this problem, and until we got a new pump. So I doubt that all of us would have similar problems, irrespective of the internal equipment we have, if there isn't some systemic problem with the system. Thank you very much for...
Adam?
Thank you.
Hi, Rick. Adam Lazer here. Appreciate your time coming up on a Saturday. I just have a question on this that hasn't been asked, which is, what's the cost of the new pit that they're proposing to be done? Because if we're only looking at 4 pits, it seems to me that we need to know what that number is to determine whether or not it's worth it to take a shot at a day and a half worth of labor. So can I get an answer to that question? What's the cost of the new pit?
If you look on the second page of the VDOE capital needs plan, all those numbers are there.
So can you help us understand this, what we're looking at?
Well, there are two PRVs that are covered under the 32,700. That column we are anticipating doing in 2019.
Is that a pit as well, or is that just the...
Yes.
So we're looking at...
There's no breakdown, so it's kind of hard to understand.
Right. So we're looking at $32,700 to do 4 new pits?
I believe that would only be 2.
So it would be 2 new pits. Okay, so $16,000 a pit.
No.
Okay, so...
No, Como is 21.
I'm sorry?
You go down the schedule.
Yeah, it keeps going.
One of those pits, Adam, was only going to be, I believe, a metering pit. The DPW one was not going to be, I don't believe, including a PRV. So the cost for the PRV pits is higher than the middle breakdown. It's probably closer to 20,000 plus. The numbers that we have, when we go to public meeting with this stuff, we essentially get budget numbers, right? So until the project is approved, there's nobody that's actually bid on this project yet. We've taken, yeah.
Okay, so the short answer is we're looking at somewhere in the range
$20,000.
$20,000 per new pit.
Yes,
Okay.
give or take.
So I'm a big believer in what Rick had said a minute ago, which is if you're going to do something, do it right. Okay? I have a background in commercial real estate and residential real estate. I know this stuff to some extent, and I do this. And I've got concerns that we're looking at $20,000 per pit, which was, we could make the argument based on what Jay read that it was rejected, but we're talking about a day and a half's worth of labor for each pit to potentially, possibly fix this problem. So we're looking at somewhere in the range of maybe $2,000 or $3,000. He already said the part's already ordered. So if it's a day and a half's worth of labor, I don't understand why we're not taking a gamble here for 10 grand that could potentially fix all 4 of these pits with the right equipment, and might fix our problem and not need new pits for some longer period of time, and these people wouldn't be risking their houses, which would put the district on the hook.
There's a lot of information there that you just said isn't right. So let me just say something here, okay?
Go ahead.
The 32,000 included vaults. The vault is already in at the DPW, so that was exempt here. There's a new vault going in at Upper Lakeview, which was West. Most of the money would have been on Upper Lakeview. It was replaced the piping. There's roughly 30, I don't have all the numbers in front of me here. I didn't come prepared to discuss, get into detail of the pits. But the vault is part of it so that they can access it and have all the meters in. We already have one. The other one was a new vault with the piping inside that vault, and then we were going to replace the piping and the meters inside the DPW. So we can't do 4 at 32,000. That's totally unreal.
No, I can tell you, anytime you open up a street, you're at least 15. When you have to put something in there, you have to have $15,000-$20,000 a piece, and it's not going to be done in a day and a half. It's not a day and a half.
We're talking about replacing the existing PRV that's in there. We're talking a day and a half, 2 days, and that's with excavation. You'd be about $4 or $5 grand probably by the time, if it required excavation. If it didn't, then but we have no way. You have old. Half the time we go into these pits and try to work with 30 or 40-year-old pipe fittings, we end up with an issue. We can't reuse that. There's this much. There's literally 3 inches of piping in it because you've got to So you've got to dig up outside, cut the pipe, and rebuild all the way in, right? So the question still remains as to whether or not a new, and I've reached out to a lot of people trying to find out if we can put in a new 2-inch PRV and expect to not see ghost flow at night. So anytime you have a large body PRV like that, it is not designed to handle small flows, right? So it's not designed to handle these midnight flows. So what will happen is the diaphragm doesn't seat properly, new, old, whatever. It's not, with a 2-inch, with a solo 2-inch PRV, we're likely going to get bleed through on that PRV when no one's using water. So I am not aware as to whether or not we can expend money on that. I don't know. That's again the commissioners, whether or not we can spend money on that PRV. But even if we could, from what I've found out, it's unlikely that we're going to fix the issue that we're having, because we're going to get bleed through a large body PRV without having a secondary smaller one in there.
Okay, so that's kind of what I was getting at. So if it's $20,000 for the pit and it's a day and a half with the labor, you said on the high end it's $5,000, on the low end it's significantly less than $5,000, but it's impossible to know even the likelihood of that working.
No, because we aren't going to know until we actually pull the stuff out and see if we can reuse those old pipe fittings.
Okay, well, for the public here to have the understanding of the cost of a new pit versus replacement, and this is all valuable information, I appreciate you taking the time to explain.
The other issue with just doing that replacement is we can't fit another PRV in there, and that's really what my goal was, is to get these smaller body PRVs inside of the pits as well, so that as soon as this problem was brought up to me, I mean, that's when I started looking into it, and I know we can't capture all the low flow with a large PRV. So
is that pretty clear to everybody? About it's kind of like you have a big device, and with really and at nighttime flows, that big device may not seat properly. So you want to have like a little side small device which really seats well at nighttime. And that new device, when you put all that together, it won't fit an existing pit that's there now.
Okay, so my one follow-up question is, then why did the district buy the replacement PRV to potentially fix John's problem if changing that PRV wouldn't likely fix John's problem? It seems to me like that's just wasting money.
sure, it was we had purchased that for, I think it was down on the Como PRV when we were having an issue down there to see but it just never. It's a fair question, Adam, but I mean, it's not like it's going bad. It's it's not something that has a shelf life on it. So
yeah, but we're never going to use it. When would we ever use it? If we're not using it now, when would we use it?
It would be, it's in stock. So if there was ever an emergency on it, that we have a replacement PRV, which we didn't have before, and it would be used if we were to ever do one of these rehab projects. We have that PRV available. I mean, we'd still want to maintain a stock with it, but it's.
Because we have projects that wouldn't be cost effective or likely to work. Like, I'm missing something here. I don't understand why we have a piece of equipment that we're unlikely to use. Like, we're stocking it. Like, how long does it take to get it if we needed one? Like, I don't understand.
A few days.
A few days. So we literally spent how much money to buy a piece of equipment that we're not going to use indefinitely?
Honestly, Adam, I would have to go back and look at how the conversation occurred that we ended up buying that PRV pit. We may have been considering just replacing it at one point, and then through calls that were made and dealing with other people, finding out that probably wouldn't work. So it was we purchased the piece of equipment, we put the thing to vote, didn't happen. Like I said, we're going back a year to try to figure out how that and why that got purchased.
I mean, I think point well taken, Adam. I think everything should be scrutinized going forward now.
We do have a stock item for almost everything we have in the village district, and we did not have one of those. So.
Hi, I'm Ron Sanister in the Lakeland Circle. I have one quick question. This is really for Rick, and it might help everyone put some perspective on high and low pressure. So can you talk about the state requirements for water systems to deliver low pressure, and is there a requirement on the high side too? I think because right now
standards. You're considered a large water system, and on the minimum pressure is to be 20 pounds per square inch under all conditions. And that's in order to at least get water into a home, and that's something that usually utilities have that issue and struggle to have that issue. On the high end is typically it's about 100 pounds is what the normal operating pressure should be on the high end. You know, as far as the legality of that issue, you know, we recognize there will be these instances with occasionally some higher pressures in the distribution system, but normally it shouldn't be more than 100. And then if you are up at that level, there should be a PRV valve in each home for that, you know.
So a homeowner can protect themselves against high pressure, but if they don't get enough pressure, there's nothing they can do.
The district should be obligated to provide the low pressure, and that's, again, gets into the getting the water up to the summit here the lodge. You know, you need to, you know, each zone is boosted, and then obviously the person near the top end of the zone has the lowest, person at the bottom end of the zone is going to have the highest.
I think he was asking too, Rick, is there an actual, even though we all would love it to be under 100 everywhere, is there a standard for it to be under 100 on a large public water system?
Again, it's a kind of a recommendation.
Sure.
And that we you know, that the standard is puts in place. So, is it against the law? No. Public Utilities has requirements for public regulated utilities for lower than 100. Theirs is 85 psi. But again, the utility should take steps to address the issue, and that's something I think is hope this commission will start to, not just on a short term but long term, start to address at everyone's location.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm Michael, and I live on Oak Ridge. Fortunately, we don't have problems with this just yet anyway. But I'm wondering, you're talking about putting a lower pressure valve along with a...
The project we planned for, so there's an existing PRV pit at Lakeview that feeds, or at Upper Lakeview that feeds Upper Lakeview Road, and then there's a line fed off from that feeds down in a few homes on Oak Ridge and Lower Lakeview. So we are aware that by dropping the pressure coming down, we have to still try to maintain enough pressure on Upper Lakeview. So the concept here was to put in two separate, completely separate PRVs. So one would be set at a pressure of, you know, 50 coming out or 60 coming out to feed Upper Lakeview, and one would be set substantially lower than that to feed, you know, Oak Ridge. That would drop those houses down into the, hopefully into the 90s. So that's the concept with the pit plan. Not something we can do with the space that we have currently, but that was the plan. So the lower pressure.
Current homeowners put in a valve that would take care of that lower pressure as well?
They cannot. So you can't boost your pressure up any higher. So whatever you're at.
No, but what I'm saying is, you said that the valve you have now doesn't recognize it when there's a low flow.
Sure. So yeah,
the other one will.
These 3/4 or 1 inch bodied valves that go inside of the home. Yes, that's the design for those, is take care of low flows coming into the home, or you know, anything under 10 gallons a minute. It should have no problem handling. The diaphragm and everything is much. It's a whole different construction on them. So yes, that's designed for those. So even if we have too high a pressure coming from the street, you can control it from that PRV and beyond in the home.
You know, I just wanted to come here. You know, I've got a little schematic here of the system. You know, there's a Aspen pressure. There's one in Aspen, and you know, pressure reducing valve. There's Rigi, R-I-G-I, pressure reducing valve. I think this one. Yeah, there's so anyway. You know, there's pressure reducing valves all over the place, and that's just the nature of the design of the system, because you're lifting that water again the 750 feet to the top of the hill.
Barry?
Yeah. I don't have a water pressure problem, but when I built my house a bunch of years ago, I hooked up a strainer before my pressure reducing valve right after the main shut off to keep grit out of the pressure reducing valve. You can check the strainer every once in a while and get stuff out of it. Then I put a meter in front and a meter in the back of it off of T's, so I can see my incoming pressure and my outgoing pressure on the PRV at my house, and you get down there with your tool and you adjust the diaphragm to bring it down to an acceptable level of 50 or 60 pounds. So you know what you got coming in, you know what's on the other side of your valve. So what I don't understand is if people are still getting over 100 pounds in their house with a pressure reducing valve, why isn't a gauge being put on that to find out if it's actually working? Which is simple. You go to these 4 or 6 people's houses.
I have a brand new gauge, just put it on last weekend.
And
Brand new.
what's it show?
120 last night. 126 is actually what it was at.
You tweak it down on the
Already
diagram?
have. It blows right by it. And the PRV is only less than a year, and it's a watts regulator.
I know,
bought
but
it
I'm
right
saying
down.
if you got one something on one side and you still have 100 over here and you can't tweak it down, there's something wrong with your regulator.
Well,
I mean, that's the way they work.
and if there's too much pressure, it'll blow right by it.
No, the regulator's supposed to bring it down from 100 and something to 65.
Web
It
told
does
me
in my house.
The people at SW Web told me if the pressure's too high, it won't retain.
So that's where you can get into, John, that you need to get a better PRV. If they told you it can't handle the pressure that you're dealing
Then you
with,
get the wrong one.
then it is more expensive.
It's the same one I took out. It's exactly the same.
They build them very different now than they used to. I mean, it's just, I hate to,
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
The new valve that you have?
Yes.
For the pit, what's the brand name on it?
that I can't tell you on top of my head.
Is it Watts?
I don't know. I don't know.
I'll change the regulator again. I don't have a problem doing that.
Watts makes multiple versions of the same valve.
It was exactly the same. Exactly the same.
I understand that, but I mean, it's just, we're
Well,
not.
I'll change it again, and I know it's going to do the same thing.
You know, we already hit on something that you might be missing.
I'll change it.
That isn't
You
what-
gotta get the right valve.
And why is everybody else having the same problem like this?
I don't have the problem. And
I'm saying on the hill. There's 4 or 5 homes that have a problem.
I have 145 pounds, but
Okay.
what I want, let me finish, please. If you put a strainer in front of it like that, you said, that catches any of the
I have
sediment. You might have sediment underneath.
The one I took out, there was nothing in it. No sand, nothing.
Okay. Then I would strongly suggest getting a better valve. Primary, secondary valve will do it for you.
Well, we just said that Watts is a good name.
But you're not addressing the issue. Get a better valve.
Gotta look at the specs on the valve and see if it'll handle the high incoming pressure.
Larry, it's the same one I took out.
Okay, let's keep the conversation to one person.
I mean,
Yeah, I just, very quickly, just wanted to reiterate what I think we know. Ian's been taking pressure readings, he's used my house for a couple of weeks, and I've always remembered the pressure on my gauge to be around 124 or so. Ian, with his calibrated gauge, is now seeing 130, he's even as high as 135 at my house.
Between 95 and 135 with variation.
Yeah. Now, with the hydro model, when the system was installed, that new line was installed, it shows the pressure, and I'm at the blow-off at 118. So we can see right here, we actually do have, over time, an increase in the pressure in our particular line.
That's a little bit relative, Jay.
Yeah, I know. This is just
Well,
the model.
Yeah, plus there is variation. So the way a PRV works is it opens and closes. So you're going to have a high range and a low range on that PRV. So at times we're going to be at 95 to 100 at a minimum in order to feed Upper Lakeview with enough pressure. And then if it's bleeding through, you're going to get up into that 130 plus range. So we're always going to be over 90 to 100 PSI on that line. There's unless we get that second PRV installed to feed the upper zone, where there's no scenario where we can feed that line with under 100 PSI. But I could go pull a reading today, and that's why the chart recorder that we have has, peaks and valleys, because you're going to go from 95 to 130 to 95 to 130 to 90, and it's going to keep doing that. There's too much usage off that. There's too many homes off that line for it to be a nice, straight, steady line. You're going to have peaks and valleys.
So my last point is, with the interpretation of a vote of no on the particular warrant articles regarding this pit installation, my opinion is different, that the device inside the pit, if it failed completely today, it blew up, you have to replace it. So if we're...
And we could go to court to get permission to do it.
Now, so is that a legal opinion from the DRA? They told you cannot address...
Well, we'd have to petition the court for it, and that's been said over the years. That's not changed.
What happens if you, well, first of all, if it can be incorporated by the operating budget, or the existing budget, that's the decision by the commissioners. But once you have to go and appropriate more funds, then it has to go back to the annual vote meeting for the voters.
Exactly.
That it has to be done. You have to petition a judge, and it's very more challenging now to get a special annual meeting. It has to be a catastrophic event.
And so that's my point. We do have a valve on the shelf. If Ian, can fit into that 28, and maybe, okay, take a couple of weeks at Weight Watchers, but if you can, if you can fit into that pit and possibly replace that
I still have
valve.
people to work for me too.
Yeah. Good choice, good choice. But if we could possibly remedy this situation before the February meeting to appease, I don't have any personal leaks in my home at home, but I do have the high pressure. I'm not as worried because I designed my home a little differently. But for these other folks that have 40-year-old homes and they had no choice in the design of that home at that time, they're now seeing problems because of what appears to be the beginning of a failure of a PRV. So if there's a very
Well, I think there's a takeaway from today, hopefully, is that is the short-term, on the short-term basis can the commissioners do to address the issue within the constraints, the financial budgets they have, and the practical aspect of it, and then also setting up so that in February they're gonna come back to the voters with a higher budget, a higher warrant article number. I can tell you right now than what's there now. So that's the takeaway as far as I'm concerned for this issue. You know.
Okay. So if you can look into whether you can address this problem, that would be great. I appreciate it. And thank you very much.
I'd like to move this on, so.
Can I just ask a simple question? With the 4 pits, I'm only hearing about one that's having potential concerns right now.
Sure.
Are the other ones stable at current time?
I'm going to try to keep this as a simple answer, but we have a very large system that's very undocumented, and none of the pits have any semblance of kind of SCADA control over them or anything like that. So anything that we get is a manual read off it. So whether or not some of these other pits are having failures, not that we know of, but there may be times, through pressure mapping that we've done on some of the other zones recently that are off some of those PRVs, it does not appear that we're climbing over that 115 mark. That one pit that we're talking about is a little bit special because, for the most part, where we placed a pit, it's relatively level beyond it, 20, 30 feet in elevation change. This PRV pit up on Upper Lakeview has 100+ feet of elevation change to it, which is what makes it more difficult than the average.
Good question.
It is.
Every part of the infrastructure is aging. So
She's talking about doing one a year instead of doing them all in one shot.
Again, my suggestion is
I believe we were only looking at doing one PRV pit on the warrant last year. We were doing one metering pit, one PRV pit, and that is how we ideally want to try to. I mean, this is the system as a whole. Say there's about 15 miles of pipe and X amount of valving and everything. It's not something that realistically we're going to be able to just tackle in one sweep, no matter how you dice, whether we deal with the PRVs or valving or metering. So ideally, that is how we, over the course of 10 years or 20 years, you want to put a plan in place that we go after one pit this year, 3 valve clusters this year, and you do it in segments. So that's exactly how we ideally want to do it.
Tanks coming up next.
Yeah, we have the
which
next
is a
thing
lot
we're talking
more,
about.
But
So-
very good point.
So we had a plan in place to do 2 of them last year, and then we were going to do 2 every year, and then we dropped it back to 2 the first year, 1 every sequential year until we got them all done. That was
voted on.
we started with the 2 last year and they got voted down. So that's why it isn't like we've been sitting there with our hands in our pockets doing nothing. That was the initial plan. All right. Go ahead. I like to. This will be the last question, and I'll let somebody else.
So I heard some really good ideas from a variety of people here. I think Larry just kind of started it, saying that the PRV potentially in some of these homes is insufficient, doesn't meet the specifications required to solve the high water. Correct? Yep. Yes. Rick, you agree with that?
Adam, without knowing exactly what make and model, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Okay. So what I'm thinking, perhaps it makes sense for someone like yourself, Ian, to make an actual recommendation for these homes that are affected and say, here's a couple of PRVs that are high quality, can handle this high pressure that we have in the system, and I'm not going to be held liable for this, but I recommend. I get it. I cringed for you, but but I recommend
That's
that
what
this...
we have an engineer for.
Yeah, but okay, so maybe it's Paul Fluid, whoever it is, say,
Right.
hey, I recommend this, so that potentially, if Larry is identifying the issue, I bet you John would be pretty happy to say, I don't want to buy the same thing again, let's get one that is, if you can make that recommendation, or Paul, or whoever,
Right.
and that solves or potentially solves a problem, and then saves the taxpayers money on the other end, because doesn't become an urgent problem anymore, for a few $100s a house, or whatever it is, $500, I don't know. I don't have this problem, so I don't know, but that could rectify the situation, and affordably so, and quickly, so we don't go into the winter, minimizing our risk.
I think that having information available with a couple of different options is a good idea without liability. But it's just, it is one of those things that we do get under plumbing code once you get into, that kind of leaves water operator territory and moves into plumbing code once you get into the PRV. Believe it or not.
Yeah, Ian is not the one.
I get it.
One
If you've got
person at a
four
time.
people, if you've got 4 individual homeowners all trying to solve the same problem, it
Right.
makes sense that those 4 people could either work together or have someone advise them as to how to solve the problem.
Honestly, like I said, it does, once we get past that ball valve in the house, we can recommend equipment, but it does move into plumbing code, and the best thing to do would be to probably contact a plumber and say, hey, guys, this is what we're dealing with. We put in a Watts XYZ valve, it didn't work. What would you suggest we use? And I think Larry brought up a good point with, we undoubtedly have sediment in this system, and the newer versions of these can be a very finicky, what we're finding is the newer version of these can be a very finicky device. So I wouldn't be surprised, John, if we were to open up your PRV that there's some grit in there. And it's unfortunate that that's something we deal with as a system, but it is something that we deal with as a system. And until we address that within a whole other scope of work, which would be adding some kind of sand filtration or something like that, that would be the only way we're going to address that sort of an issue. So we do have a lot of issues that need addressing, and they can, at times like this, compound on one another. But I don't want you guys to think that we're happy with 130 PSI going through those lines, because as a system with the users, if we break a line, whether it's our water main or whether it's a service line feeding to your home, that's a cost on the district that, in turn, is a cost on the people that live in the district. So ideally, we want to address these pressure concerns. And of course, we don't ever want to get a call from a homeowner that their line burst and flooded their house, which is of course happened. So, which is, again, unfortunately, that's the cost of the homeowner. But, we have as much stake in making sure this thing works as you do, because it's your money. And obviously, as you guys are feeling right now, you want it addressed, and we are trying to address it. We've kind of beat around it a couple times as far as whether or not we can legally address that valve, and again, I can't speak to that whether we can or can't. So
I'm going to move this along. All right, for my end. All right. We're beating this pretty well. All right, we're all set on this. Minor tank replacement. Ralph and Chuck are going to handle this.
This issue. One thing that may be helpful is if you look at this particular schedule called water system tank analysis. It tells you a story. And essentially the story is we have, the first column is the $5,000 warrant article as it was amended on the floor last year. What we were confronted with is the warrant article covers inspection and lining only, relining the tank. The next column covers progress to date. Unfortunately, what happened is that the first Rhinoc tank, which we envisioned to be, after it was inspected, would be a mirror image of the second Rhinoc tank. There's two 30,000-gallon tanks up at Rhinoc. They're very critical to the water system. And so therefore what happened is that Mass Tank, our contractor, examined the first tank, came to a determination that it was not feasible to reline the tank. So therefore we were then dealing with inspecting the second Rhinoc tank to determine whether or not that was in the same condition. Unfortunately, the two tanks are in the same condition. They're not available, not deemed to be available for relining. So now we're in the replacement mode, which is a change from our additional theory or our additional position. Bear in mind that these tanks haven't been inspected over its lifetime. There was some work done, but currently it was an unknown as to the quality of those particular tanks. Many of the other tanks are in the same vintage, so you have some of these tanks that have been around for over 50 years. Some of them have been replaced and modified.
I don't mean to interrupt, just in terms of the schedule, is it this one?
Yeah.
A lot of people, I don't think it was in the package passed out today.
It's at the last page.
What does it cost the car?
It's this one here.
It's not in all the packets.
Okay.
What's the title on it? VDOE system tank now?
Yeah.
Jay and I got it yesterday.
VDOE was, yeah, I have one from that.
All right. I apologize for that, but
They don't have it.
It's in there. Yes, it's in the package.
Some people have it.
Other people too.
all right. You're going to have to bear with me, though. I apologize for that.
I got it.
Okay, let's calm it down now.
Okay. The planned lining is if we stuck with the original theory, original practice that was envisioned to begin with. Notable item is the Rhinoc tank would require $512,000. This is the result of the fact that the two tanks have failed as far as relining. They aren't physically failed at the present time. They are, to our knowledge, they aren't leaking. However, it is a risk element associated with it that somewhere along the line they will start leaking. And depending upon where they leak will be determining as to how high we can fill them. So you have $512,000. There was an analysis done, and you see these various schedules attached in your package dealing with the replace option. The replace option gives us the ability of having higher longevity to the tanks. These are the 5,000-gallon tanks. Permits, it is higher cost, and you can look at the bottom of the next page and see that there is something like a $50,000 or $40,000 difference as a result of taking the replacement option. So we have two options with respect to the Rhinoc tank that were investigated by the engineer. One being a series of steel tanks. These would be three 30,000-gallon tanks, or a cast-in-place concrete tank, which would be effectively one tank with two chambers. As it works out, the concrete tank is less expensive. So we're recommending that we would spend $512,000 to replace the Rhinoc tanks. And this would be done after the annual meeting. So the last column is the recommended, what we are recommending. And it comes up with this is just for tanks. No PRVs are included in it. None of the other items are included in it. If you're looking at taking care of the tanks, you come up with $737,295. These are the best available numbers that we have. The tank replacements, the Rhinoc tank replacement is an engineering estimate that was provided us by DeVoy and King. We are increasing the storage from 60,000 to 90,000. And Chuck, maybe you want to comment on that?
Sure. Actually, so I'm Chuck Goodling from Du Bois and King. We've been assisting the district for a number of years on a variety of things, including water system improvements. And so I think in the handout, there should be the last 2 pages is a memorandum from Du Bois and King. Is that from Du Bois and King? If you want to look at into the details, but we were asked to take a look at what is the current amount of volume stored in the overall water system, and what is the recommended. Oh, that's not.
I don't believe it's included. Just the next page.
Fluid engineering says division of Du Bois and King.
Yes. We're fluid engineering and Du Bois and King, and for all intents and purposes are on the same thing. Paul is still around and working with us on this project. But long story short, we looked at available storage and in light of recommended storage amounts, looking at the DES standards, and there was a shortfall of around 30,000 gallons.
Chuck, can you hold up what you're looking at? 'Cause I don't think we have it.
You do not have the storage requirement memorandum. You do have the 2
Cost
estimates for the cast in place versus the steel.
So I think the last 2 pages in the handout are the 2 cost estimates. One is for the steel option, one is for the concrete option. So just to get back to that point of volume, looking at the current usage and making some allowance for growth over the next 20 years, which is a responsible thing to do when you're talking about building a storage tank that's going to be around for a long, long time. That shortfall is around 30,000 gallons. So the 2 tanks, the 2 Reinhardt tanks that you have now, total 60,000 gallons. So if we're going to build a new tank up there to replace them, we would recommend that tank be sized for 90,000 gallons. So the 60,000 gallons that you have now, plus the 30,000 gallon shortfall, would equal the total of 90,000 gallons. So that's what the recommendation is in terms of sizing the replacement tank.
I believe that's a state issue as well.
Yeah, on the storage tank, whether it's going from 60 to 90,000 isn't a substantial increase. But what is important is this is proposing to be concrete, which is going to last at least 50 years. And second of all, it's a 2-compartment chamber, so that if you had to, have to clean one side, you can still utilize the other side, and so that it gives you some flexibility and redundancy. As far as, again, if you say, well, why don't we stick with the 60,000? The cost differential isn't that much between the 60 and the 90,000. And the 90, these tanks are located in the middle of your distribution system. It's not at the top and it's not at the bottom, but it's located in the middle. That's water that's already out of the ground, so you're able to move it around where you need it a lot easier. So if there's a break in the water main above or a break in the water main below, you'd have some storage, a fair amount of storage there to utilize.
Okay.
So the question?
I just had a question on. So we have 2 tanks at the top of Reinhardt, both 30,000 gallon tanks, that have failed an inspection for lining because of dents in the tanks. But we don't know. What we don't know is they stopped inspection early. So we really don't know the status of where they are. And my question really is about time frame. Are we in a situation that we're looking at 2 tanks that need to be replaced immediately? Do we need to execute on this next year? Or is it time to start saving for the full tank replacement, do it right with a cast?
Well, so from a safe perspective, one of the tasks that we do is we go out, we perform every 3 years an inspection of the water system, and if we identify a significant deficiency that we think could jeopardize the public health risk of the water system, that is an item that we know significant deficiency. Essentially, the water system has 30 days to either address the significant deficiency or submit a plan, an action plan of how they're going to address that issue. Obviously, I got to tell you right now, if I were to come out and do a sanitary survey and I found the tanks in that condition, that is a significant deficiency. And as far as I'm concerned, you need to address that as soon as possible.
So that's a helpful piece of the puzzle.
That's right.
In terms of understanding and where everyone is thinking.
So, and just to continue on, and so I recognize it can't be fixed in 30 days. So what I would say, I would tell the commissioners, submit a plan to us, the state, that explains how you're going to address the issue. And the issue would be, to address it would be, you're going to go to the voters in February, seeking approval to put in the new storage tanks, whatever size you want, and then you would then continue forward after that, and actually design, put it out to bid, and start construction. And that's the time frame that I would be looking for. As far as saving money, it's way past that time to save money on this issue.
No, yeah, my question was really about a saving plan for the purchase of the tank replacements, but I think you answered my real question, which was, we need to do this, and the time is now.
That's right.
That's what I'm hearing.
Okay, there was one second, go ahead.
Yeah, so I just had a point of clarification, I guess, for Ralph. I thought I heard that the concrete was more expensive than the steel, but I'm looking at these numbers, and it looks like the...
He said less.
Okay, all right, so, yeah, thank you.
Those are real numbers. Budget numbers, when you say that. Go ahead, Ken.
I know at this point, like we said, it's moot. We're going to have to move forward regardless. But I'm just curious, if we're doing these DES inspections or inspections every 3 years, why wasn't it noticed that something needed to be relined years ago, as opposed to now it's inevitable neither tank is relined?
Well, the district actually moved forward in 2014 and 15 with they actually voted to borrow $100,000 from our program, which we entered into a loan, and the prices came in higher than expected, and they did not take any action on it. That was to reline the tanks at that time. So I'm a little frustrated sitting here, quite frankly, because we actually entered into a loan, and the loan financing was there to do the work, to reline, but it was never done. So that's why I don't want to go back, okay, and
we
revisit.
Can't go back now. I'm just,
right,
I'm
but
new
now
to the area, so I'm just trying to get historical information.
Yeah, this is.
Can I follow up on it?
Yeah.
I mean, there was one bidder on that. He never did water tanks. All he did was gas tanks for gas stations. We said, no, we don't need to be practiced on. And that's why we walked it.
My name is Grayson Merrill, Middle Shore Drive. Question on the concrete tanks. You said they're a 50-year tank?
Well, I mean, concrete in the ground is going to last a long time.
My question is, what can they be lined? We're looking longevity and just...
Go ahead.
Yeah, I believe these will be lined tanks just the same way, like with an epoxy. We're going to go into these and inspect them every X amount of years. To kind of address both questions, there's been a lack of maintenance and upkeep on this system for a long time, which is kind of how you fall into where we're at. That includes whether, I don't believe any of these tanks short of Rhineac, once 7 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, has ever been entered. And we have whatever it is, 8, 9 storage tanks. So, it hasn't been commonplace in the past for people, for the district to go ahead and schedule inspections and linings on these tanks. But again, to not go backwards, where we're at now, and these tanks, I think it's relatively common knowledge from talking to people from way back when in here, 40 years ago, that these tanks have been dented since they were installed. So this is it's not necessarily a surprise that we found when they went in. So but now here we are, and the project that Ralph is describing, I believe, includes the booster zone as well. So this is a two-phase project. I think that there's also an issue of pressure on the low side on that end of the mountain that incorporated in either one of these projects. We're going to be addressing a new booster station in that zone as well. So
my concern is moving forward the maintenance of what we're going to. I mean, there's a lot of money that you're asking people.
True. Okay, but I think on typically though, concrete storage tanks are not lined like a steel tank, and the maintenance typically on a concrete tank is a lot less. A steel tank, typically the age is between 30 and 40 years, buried in the ground. This concrete tank, the age is estimated up to 80 years. You know, it's kind of like a foundation, you know, it lasts a long time.
There's sealants and whatnot that
Yeah.
go onto it to keep water penetration, and there is some semblance of a, I guess it depends. We'd have to look at what the different options are on a lining versus a non-lining and what that requires for maintenance, you know, if we do or don't do whatever. But
as far as, you know, two cells allows you to drain and inspect, you know, make sure there's proper access to the facilities. You know, it's upgrading the whole thing.
And in the future, I mean, there was a lot of expense for Mass Tank to come out and do inspections and cleanings of the tanks. That would be something in the future we'd probably do in-house in order to save, you know, a considerable amount of money on that. But it would be something that every X amount of years you go into one of the...
Every 5 years it should be inspected.
We just paid
Ideally.
let's call it $7,000 for inspection.
Per tank.
Per tank. And it was $38,000 and some change for lining, just across the way. So you're talking, you add them both together, that's $45,000. If they want it every 5 years is what their recommendation is.
Well,
just the inspection, you start at $7,000, then if you have to inspect, you start every 5 years. It's a domino effect.
They do it.
And I noticed on this that it says that the inspection again is taking place, so you noted that these, and maybe I'm reading it wrong on the database, but it says 6820 for inspection this year, and then it also indicates 6820 for inspection again next year, or 6850, I'm sorry. Is that, am I not reading it correct?
Well, the columns are individual line items. So it's to record the expenditure that took place.
Okay.
So it's not a duplication. It just says, okay, you're looking to get a total bottom line for what has happened. Okay. So what you're attempting to do is to look at, if you're looking at lining versus replacement, it's everything that we know, all the action items, and the lining is the 5,000-gallon tanks. So you can take the differential and understand what the cost difference is for replacement.
So those tanks have been inspected and killed. How are the other tanks?
Well, this one's been inspected in mine over here.
Okay.
This one here.
And
how many tanks are there, I guess?
That's right here. You got
7 tanks on the list?
Yeah, whatever you got on the list. And we're going to run into issues with some of the smaller tanks, one for access because some of them don't have proper manhole access for the crews to go into.
Can I keep this on the 30,000-gallon tanks? We're going to address the 5,000 in a minute when we get done with this. So I don't want to confuse everybody, okay?
Thank you. Jay Buckley, to Rick's point, doing a job once and doing it correctly. The 90,000-gallon figure that Chuck had proposed, and I believe, Rick, are you in concurrence with that? My question with regards to the 90,000-gallon figure, does that take into the possibility that the 600 remaining lots or 400 buildable lots could be built up? In other words, that full build-out, will that accommodate full build-out?
We made an allowance for growth based on, I believe, the average housing construction that's happened each year over the past period of time, and then turn that into a storage volume amount. I don't know that
The next 20 years.
Over a 20-year period. Yeah. I don't know that equates to full build-out, but it was the approach that we used to just make an allowance for growth based on what's been happening in the, I guess, the semi-recent past.
You know, the thing about the storage here is that, you know, you're not like a typical municipal water system because your demand is not during the weekday. You don't need fire protection. You know, it's domestic use, and it's also scattered throughout the distribution system. So to have it all in one location, you know, it's not necessarily the best idea right now, and you don't have that now.
Rhineac probably feeds about 85% of the district. So.
But it's central. But it's kind of, as you look at the hydraulic grade line, it's smack in the middle. So if you would have put, you know, someone said, let's put the 90,000 at the very top, I would question that because one, the cost of getting all that water all the way up the mountain is an added expense. You don't need all that water at the top of the mountain. You do need it where it's at, so as far as the growth issue, 600 additional lots. Jake, is there 600 more homes here? God love you, okay, it's going to be a totally different development, okay? The distribution piping won't be able to serve it,
Right.
okay? Which is another thing I want to talk about later on, okay? But, so the 90,000 gives you, basically a day's supply of water,
A
something.
high peak usage days demand
Yeah.
right now, give or take, so.
Okay. Sorry.
All right, go ahead.
So, ending the conversation on the runoff tank.
Wait a second, I see him. He's bringing out a point here.
Okay. The 512 and the 657 numbers for steel includes 55,000, which is the distribution requirements for the pressure zone. So you'll see on the schedule that it's a slightly different number on total for the engineering. So we added that because that is a number that was provided by Ian and wasn't provided by the engineer. So that's the total all-in cost of the Rhinoc tanks plus the related pressure zone associated with it. So in terms of moving forward on the steps, we have appropriated funding for the engineers to start their design. That design will be required to prepare a bid document. We'll have to go out for bids. We'll have to get that information prepared for the warrant article for this coming February. So that's the current plan, is that we're going to turn on the engineering at this particular point. Hopefully that turnaround will result in a bid document, plans, drawings, all that related information, and we then will engage in the marketplace with respect to getting a contractor to bid on this. And the bid will obviously contain a provision. The bid document will contain a provision that says it's subject to financing, subject to the approval, the warrant article, and financing. Financing is another thing that we need to explore, and that will result in what kind of debt instrument is out there, what kind of annual payment, that kind of thing. That remains to be explored. When we get the total actual number, we will then be dealing with actual specifics with respect to the financing.
There's a couple of people in front of you, so I will get to all of you.
I have a number of questions here. I must be missing something here. I'm looking at the 2 pages at the end, the probable construction cost that was presented, Chuck?
Yes.
Okay, so the last page says $603,000. It says replace tanks in year 50. You see that?
Yeah, this is the steel tank option.
Okay. The page before that says for $150,000 less, we can get a concrete tank that'll last 30 to 50 years longer. What am I missing?
As far as what?
Well, for $150,000 less, we can get a tank that lasts 30 to 50 years longer.
We're recommending the concrete option.
Okay, so
you're not missing anything.
Concrete cheaper.
That's the benefit of the concrete
okay,
option.
I'm like, why are we even being presented this?
You also have there was discussion over just replacing the existing 2 steel tanks. There's been a lot of discussion over this out, and as far as just to give people the numbers and try to keep it from being a question later on.
A broad comparison of sticking with the tanks that you have versus doing something different.
Is steel better? Is that why it's more expensive?
No, it's just different.
We didn't know until we brought in the numbers which was going to be the better option. So we had to collect the information to know which was going to be the better option anyhow.
My next question is if we send this out to Fluid Engineering to create an engineering plan, what's that cost for? Chuck, can you give us an idea of what that cost would be?
Yeah, we have, if you look on the page that maybe not everybody has, but there's a line item for engineering of $17,000.
$17,000 for that. So then, my question to the commissioners on that, sorry, I'm just writing some notes, I got a bunch of questions. Has the cost to engineer that been shopped around to other engineering firms? Is there a reason why that hasn't been shopped to other engineering firms?
Why would we set ourselves back 5 years?
Please don't respond to my
Let me
question.
answer the question.
I'd like you to
Let
answer my
me
question.
answer your question.
You asked me a question.
You asked a question, I'm answering.
Good answer.
Why should we set ourselves back 5 years when we have and start a new engineer that has no idea of the system? We have an engineer that's been on board for years.
Do you want me to answer that?
Yes.
Okay. If we're asking for a 90,000 gallon tank, that's not someone to price that out and design that would not need to be intimately familiar with our entire system. All they need to do is say, hey, we're looking for a 90,000 gallon concrete tank, let's design that up.
Yeah,
There's other engineers, I'm simply asking the question, there's other engineers that are closer, so that's nothing against fluid engineering. I'm just wondering if it's reasonable at a price of $17,000 to not send that out to bid.
You're missing the
Okay,
point.
I'll answer the question.
Okay, go ahead.
So whatever financing option they pick, sometimes the financing source dictates that they go out for competitive pricing, okay, for services, all right? We, in our office, we offer a low-interest loan. We have a loan program. Typically, a community would go out and solicit services, okay? The requirement is that they go out and they base it upon qualifications, not necessarily a price. So a municipality is going to do a project, they would go out and they solicit requests for proposals from engineering services. They look at the qualifications, select someone, then they negotiate a price. So, okay. Or the other option we allow them to do, if they have an established relationship with an engineering services company, we allow them to continue on. That's what, through our financial program, we would allow them to do it. I guess Du Bois & King Fluid Engineering has been engaged with this utility for a long period of time. They do have a lot of historical knowledge. They do have a lot of information. So they can go out and solicit engineering firms. I think it's a time and effort, that I'm not sure you have available at this point in time. But that's a good point made. The cost of engineering services, I can't say what whether it's high or low, but we as a funding source would not require them to go out.
Just so you know, too, it isn't just for the concrete tanks. It's for that booster station, the work to be done to the distribution mains, and all of that. And I know what you're saying, and this is a preliminary number, so none of these numbers have been solicited by another person yet either. Like excavation, like my estimate of 55,000. Will get put out to 3 different people and be asked, like, hey, is it 55, 45, 60, who knows?
Well, I understand that this hasn't been out to bid. I get
Sure.
This is like a back of the napkin number.
Yes.
I also know there's other engineering firms, so I simply ask the question when I generally write a check for $17,000 to somebody, whether it's for an addition to my house or a car, I go to multiple car dealerships or multiple contractors and say, hey, this is the general idea I'm talking about here, what's the cost to put it together?
So what I'm saying is that typically the services they're encountering are not done that. You don't go and shop the cheapest engineering firm.
We didn't even ask for RFQ from other people. I mean, we could
I
ask
understand.
for RFQs.
But it's typically not done, if you go for the cheapest engineering firm, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get the best product.
I think
understanding. So what I'm wondering, and it actually leads into one of the other questions I wanted to ask you, which I guess I'll just throw it out now. You've been involved with other communities similar size to ours who have done systems like this. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So it seems to me that you'd have a vast amount of knowledge as to who other engineering firms could be that could bid this out. So that would give us RFQs. You could compare apples.
Well, I wouldn't give it.
That's fine. Okay,
They
I understand.
You have to slip it directly from them.
That's fine, but we could put an RFQ together. my bigger issue that I really would like to hear directly from you is to these other communities that have been able to successfully complete projects of this magnitude. What separates us, where we've been unable to do projects of this magnitude, from these communities that have been able to do projects of this magnitude?
I'm not sure.
I don't know what you're saying, man.
Well, I'm trying to understand it. I'll explain exactly what I'm trying to get at. I'm trying to understand the challenges that are facing this district.
I can answer a portion of that, I think. There's been a lot of resistance to having an increase in the water bill here for a lot of years. I've been involved with a different contractor here for 7 or 8 years, and then obviously now for about 4 years on my own. In the past, every time a conversation came up about, because this is not, he brought an action plan from 2006 that addresses almost all of these same concerns, and from my beginning time here, these concerns, these same myriad concerns have been brought up. It has been difficult to get approval for a large sum of money, millions of dollars in some cases, $500,000 in others, or hundreds of thousands in even some, to move forward with these projects. So it's you know, there's been a rotation of the commissioner boards for a long time. There's been, you know, when you have a lot of different people involved, projects seem to get, the priorities seem to keep changing. You know, so you have, we've dealt with, I would say if there was one thing, it's the raise to the bill. To be, for the community to be facing a $700 or $800 a year bill, or even more than that, people are very, it's you know, it's a tough pill to swallow, but it's something that we are having, you know, most likely that we're going to be looking at. So when you're faced with that, a lot of times people don't want to see that happen. If they can keep, why do, you know, a big question is why now? Why didn't we have to do it 10 years ago or 15 years ago? Or why can't we wait 5 more years? So it's happened a lot of times at annual meetings that we've put projects on the table and they haven't ended up getting through.
You know, I guess my response would be that, you know, over the years there's been, you know, different individuals, and not everyone has worked together up here. I went to an annual meeting once. I thought there was going to be a positive bond vote, and the next morning I got word that it failed, and I was concerned. Some of the commissioners might have voted against the bond vote. You know, and so it's personality issues is really what I see, and it's the type of community. It's a second home community for most of the part. And how many registered voters are there in the district? I don't know.
200.
Yeah, so there's not a lot. You know, so it's kind of unique. It's different than a lot of other municipalities because it's not you know, it's not the regular form of town government. You know, so it's been. I've tried, you know, and I don't think it's been that. Some of the things have been that successful. Okay. We've had programs, grant programs we've implemented that we thought that, you know, was going to be successful. But the other thing to realize here is that people, you know, have done some of the things is that they try and do it in house and at the cheapest cost. To be blunt, and it doesn't work. You get, you know, hire the professionals, hire the people that know what they're doing, and you know, do it once and do it right. You know,
so Rick, I appreciate, again, I totally believe in that, doing it once, doing it right. I'm with you on that. What I want to make sure that we're doing here, and hearing you and Ian too, identify some of the challenges that are facing the district to overcome these. We need to approach it differently because the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over again and expecting a different result. So if we don't change how we're doing this, how we're going to try and raise the money, we're going to end up with the same result in February. And I've got a concern that we have not just one, but potentially 2 new commissioners joining the board in February. So we could end up with a complete 180 from the board in just 6 short months. So we're about to spend $17,000 on engineering. We could have 2 new commissioners. We could have numbers that change. We could have virtually anything 6 months from now. Ian's shaking his head yes, because he knows that's potential.
No, it's happened a lot of times.
It's happened. So it's potentially every year. Thank you, Nancy. So what I'm kind of thinking would maybe be a good fit is if we had an independent water board that created this knowledge and
Let's
made
stay on with
excuse
this.
me,
No,
I'm asking
no.
Rick a question
No.
so we
Hey,
don't...
I'm gonna cut you off because the water board has nothing to do with this
But
right
I'm
now.
not, I'm trying to solve a problem. Excuse
Okay.
me, Mike. I'm trying to ask
You
Rick, how do we
are-
solve a problem?
Okay, you're
We
done.
can't solve a problem
You
if we don't
are
identify
done.
what the solution is.
Why don't
That's
you
all.
give him
Let me-
5 minutes? Just give him
I am
5
not.
minutes.
Wait a minute, let's stay focused on the issue and not a water board. It has nothing to do with, it has nothing to do with, I'm sorry, young lady.
Just let him finish.
Just give him 5 minutes.
He's had about 15 minutes
Rick,
here.
we're trying to identify...
Freaking garage.
We can address it afterwards. Okay, let's talk about that.
We have to come up with a different...
was the one that proposed the tank that you came up to at the annual meeting. And that was done by an independent water advisory board that the district had in place for many years. And it was put together and it was proposed and Rick came up and gave a presentation at the annual meeting. And Monday morning I got to call him and say, by the way, the bond failed.
How many years ago was that?
8 or 9?
Yeah.
So,
8 or 9.
my understanding is...
We're in the same
So
scenarios.
I've attended more commissioners' meetings besides the commissioners than anybody over the last 12 months. And in one of those meetings, I was told that the turnover in this community is approximately every 3 years by, the houses turn over every 3 years or so. So what happened 8 or 9 years ago, I don't know how relevant it is. What I want to see is we have a problem here. Everyone in this room identifies that we have a problem here. And I want to help fix this problem. And I'm trying to identify the obstacles to fixing that problem so that we can get there. And I'm thinking that if we had continuity in the people that were moving forward with this and making recommendations and then eventually making a presentation to people and potentially communicating with the responsible parties for this project, we increase the likelihood of getting the project done. What do you think about that?
I guess the only point is that, elected officials, and that could change. That change may change, So one consistent thing is, unfortunately, that I have been involved with this water system. At this point, going forward, if you don't approve something in February on the storage tanks, we're going to come back with enforcement action at the state. All right. So, and then if it keeps voting down, we're going to fine you. Okay, and then you're going to pay the fines, and the cost is going to go up. So, bottom line is that you got to move forward with this. And at the end, I want to talk about the other issues, the distribution question. All right. So,
Are we going to be done by noon?
no.
I have a bath to...
Bill, I got 2 people over here. I just
You have to-
Go ahead, please.
Could you do that enforcement action earlier?
At this point in time, I just don't want to, I don't want to be confused, I don't want to be driven by the state at this point, But after the next meeting, I think, it could be, so,
What is,
Wait a minute. I got 2 people here, then I pointed to you. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I just took a quick look at those ballpark estimates, I guess that's what you call them, from Boy and King.
Yeah.
About $172,000 for the manufacturing of the concrete tank.
Right, we call it an opinion of cost. This is an estimate based on experience on similar projects. It's an estimate at this point. We think it's a pretty good number. There's a contingency in there to guard against unforeseen things. At the end of the day, the project will be bid, and then the true cost of the project will be identified.
How many companies in New Hampshire can handle that part of the project?
Construction companies?
Yeah, based on your 100,000.
It's not that large of a project, honestly.
How many companies?
I don't know how to answer that question.
Which
You
one?
got construction contractors?
24 contractors.
There's 24 that can handle that project?
Yeah, at least.
Minimum.
Okay, it's a small
But,
project.
so, and they're familiar with putting those tanks in?
It's pretty commonplace. Right?
So if you knew those people and just had them come and look at what we need to do, couldn't they start an estimate?
That's not, it doesn't work that way. People don't...
Got to have a drawing.
Design.
So,
The state will require a professional engineer to seal the drawings.
Right.
There's a process.
got to have a design.
It's kind of a standard design for a 90,000 gallon tank.
Every project usually has an engineer's estimate on it. It goes to bid, and then...
Yeah, we're going down, again, we're going down. Okay?
But isn't it a standard design?
No, it is not. It is not. It's got to require a stamped structural engineer. It's got to be reviewed by our office, put out the bid.
But there's built some before.
Yeah, but not...
So there is a design that's been built before.
Yeah, but Larry, it's on top of the mountain, and
Yeah.
it's including a booster
Okay,
station that's different
yeah.
from others, other people, whether they built it on a flat field or on top of a mountain with a boost, there's variances to it. Every project is every project's different. They're not going to be, you can't have a cookie cutter that you hand out to.
So we have about
Steel doubles in price, the cost is going to go up. Concrete goes up,
So we
cost
should
is gonna go
expect
up.
to see at least a half a dozen people that have the capability to build that concrete tank when the bid process pursues itself.
You would hope so.
You would hope so.
Yeah.
And maybe come in at a lower cost. After negotiation.
Or a higher cost.
Negotiation.
No, the lowest, typically for our program, it's lowest responsible bidder.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I know what happened with the fiasco with Mass Tank and I didn't no bid.
Well, we've kind of blown by my topic here from 20 minutes ago, but I was just curious when they were calculating the 90,000 gallon tank, that one of the issues that the district has suffered from is leakage in our water system. And has that even been considered when we're looking at what our capacity is? Because our tank, the 30,000 gallons, to feed this number of people, 20% of that water may be leaking into the ground. So, which is something we have
I think
to
Rick is going to address our water mains at the end of this, but I would tell you that we have a significant, across this whole system, there's a significant amount of leakage that until we replace the distribution system, it has to be accounted for.
Yeah, and the other reality is that you're not going to fix the leaks in a year or 2 years or 3 years. It's over time. I mean, you got the world's beautiful ice sculptures in the wintertime, okay? Which, is not a good thing, all right? The other thing is there's no meters on any of the homes.
Right.
So people could be using water.
We have
24 hours a day.
very little oversight over where our water's going.
I mean, but people aren't watering lawns in this district, because that's just not how.
No, we got leaking boilers.
Some people are.
Things like that. So.
Yeah.
Some people
Right,
are.
we can't
I know
account
people
for it.
with sprinklers. My neighbor has one.
Yeah.
The vast majority of the wasted water.
Mike, I do want to, before everyone leaves, I want to, say something, a little bit something. Okay. Yeah.
And Mike, and another question, just to kind of reiterate, when I went to the last commissioners meeting and I asked, maybe one of the reasons that things get voted down is we've got 30 seconds to evaluate some of the warrant articles, because they've been changed even since the meeting in January. So we're put in a spot where we don't have enough information. We're not as knowledgeable as somebody who does this every day. That there should be a way to communicate what it is in a bigger picture that the commissioners are asking us to spend our money on. And
Did you guys host a meeting ahead of the warrant article?
We're going to discuss it here.
But
you changed the warrant articles at the meeting itself.
right, so
We changed them as a result of it, but most of the warrant articles were the same that went to the budget hearing. So let's not make it sound like we're down to Please,
Mike,
please, one person at a time.
I'm just making the comment that we are not as
Might come to your path.
as intimately familiar with the infrastructure, but we're the taxpayer, and you have to communicate to us and tell us what our options are. And I think we vote things down because we're put on the spot, and without all the knowledge and not without the time to process all that. And again, the alternative is legal action, and we don't want to go down that route, but please set up a system where we at least have some insight into what all this. We need visuals. We had a communication board, which that would have been the perfect vehicle to do that, and that kind of, had shut down, and that blocked off the opportunity for us to have a dialogue with our commissioners. And there's another point.
I think that was predetermined that morning, when you had a meeting at the library.
I didn't go to the other meeting.
Well, there was a lot of people that went to that, but I got it.
Anyway,
I'm sorry.
Dawn McKinnon, I just want to know what happens if no bids come in, like we lost the loan to the other and no bids came in. What happens that sets us back that's going to happen with these tanks if they do get approved?
We would probably have to be bidding.
Yeah. Put it back out.
But why is there a reason that nobody's bidding for our projects?
It takes too long to explain.
Well, I'm just saying, we lost out on funding that we could have used that would have been a system that we could have been then saving money for these concrete tanks. If that happened, that they were fixed at the time.
That was a different issue totally. There wasn't enough money that was appropriated. And then we were only going to do so much. And then the person wasn't qualified to do, he didn't do anything.
But where were the other qualified people? Why weren't they bidding for our project?
Yeah, you're asking a good question, and you know, the answer is, it's just, I guess I'll say it's the way it is. It depends on what's going on in the bidding environment, the economy. Are contractors busy? Are they not busy? There are a lot of factors that weigh into how the bidders or contractors respond to a project. Part of what we do is help get the word out. I mean, there's a big effort to let contractors know of the project, and there's a certain process we go through that leads up to the bids. So, you know, there's a lot of effort, work put into getting contractors interested in the project. But at the end of the day, I mean, there are forces at work that really nobody can control.
But being an engineer company also, they should know contractors that can do the project that they're engineering for, that they should be picking up business from you.
Right. And we
that
do.
We should be looking at for an engineering system. Company, excuse me.
You're correct. I mean, we like I say, we make an effort to get the word out to anybody and everybody we know. We have a list of dozens and dozens of contractors.
And we had a gas tank company making the bid, the one and only for this particular project. How are we not going to know that this isn't going to happen with this concrete tanks?
You can't know.
We don't know. But we're going to make the best effort that we can.
So when they bid, you go through their background and qualify them. And if they're not qualified, then you go to the next guy. That's normal operating procedure.
I realize that, but if they're doing a project, they should have also not subcontractors, but contractors doing the project for them.
We've, there's been some history of it being a little bit difficult to work in Idlewild. It's kind of, unfortunately, a little bit common knowledge. And so, and I mean, the more reliance, it was almost kind of goes to the point of what Larry was asking about. You want to try to minimize the amount of times you ask a contractor to come out to your site without work occurring, right? Because if we ask, for example, Mass Tank to put a lot of work into a project, and they spend 20, 30, 40 man hours on it, and then we bail on the project, next time we ask Mass Tank to come look at a project, their answer is going to be no. We know what happened the last time, or 2 times, or 3 times we tried. We'd rather not get involved. We have other things to do. So, I mean, ideally, we're going to try to make it I guess, to put it simply, as easy for the contractors to come in and work here. So you have a number for them to look at. We try not to waste their time. Moving forward, we're going to try not to waste the contractors' time, and we want something solid to give them when they come to put an actual estimate on it. And then, as Rick's been through a few times, we really don't want it to get voted down. So, to you guys' point, if there's more that we can do to put out ahead of time to hopefully get this done. I mean, the Commissioner Board has talked about a few times with myself about trying to make sure we pass along as much information we can so that the people know what they're voting on, and hopefully we can get this thing passed. Because we as Rick is saying, we need to make this thing pass. So, but it is, you bring up a valid point. We've had issues. It can be from small contractors to very large contractors of getting contractors in here. So,
Sharon?
I just think for clarification purposes to get something passed, I think it would be good too, as we're talking about different forms of payment, whether it be grants or bonds or whatnot, is to be able to lay that out in front of the voter and say, this is what the amount of money that we need, this is how we're going to attain it. Whether it be through taxes, whether it be through bonds, whether it be through grants, this is what's going here, here, here. And without that knowledge directly in front of us, it's hard to vote for something because we don't know where everything's going.
We did lay that out.
Okay.
Every warrant article, the funding for every warrant article is included in the warrant article. So the warrant article must clearly state where the money's coming from, whether it be removed from a capital reserve, raised by taxes, through a new loan. If the district's taking a new loan, there's a 2/3 requirement passage. So 2/3 of the persons present at the annual meeting voting would have to vote in favor of it, or the bond fails. But those outlines are required. And on a bond notice, not only do you list the bond, but you also have to raise the first year's payment. so everybody knows how much the first year's payment's going to be. And then once the bond is passed, in future years, it becomes one of the budget line items, where you see, like, if you look at the middle of the printed budget, there's Jungfrau, Oak Ridge, different projects listed out that loans have been taken for in the past, and we have to raise the money for those loans through the budget every year.
Wait a second, I got somebody over here, okay.
Hi, I'm Paula Doyle. I guess a couple comments to bring directly into the board as well. One comment about the thing that happened several years ago when there was a $100,000 loan that we weren't able to act on, and that is really frustrating when these things happen. There hasn't been that much turnover in our board. We've pretty much had 4 or 5 people who have controlled this board over the last 6, I don't know how many years, but there's not really been a lot of turnover in the people on our board. So, I guess one of my questions is, in terms of getting things approved, I went to the budget hearings last year. I went to the annual meeting, and I tried to understand what was going on and everything requested. And it's true, when we went into the annual meeting, all the warrant articles were changed. And here we are 7 months later, understanding that the tanks failed inspection, so they can't be lined. I get we now have to replace them. But here we are, 8 months later, and these other 3 tanks, which haven't even been discussed yet today, Jungfrau, Chikoro, and Hydra, they're now changing their mind about what was proposed and approved. So the voters voted to inspect and reline those tanks, and now here we are 7 months later, and now they're saying, oh, we don't want to do that anymore. Now we want to replace all those tanks. So I think we're all just kind of frustrated by what's going on in terms of whether the people who are governing our district over the last 10 years, who are still governing our district, can get this very complicated and expensive project done over the next 5 years. And I think that's the question I have. How more involved can you be to help us get this done is another question. Like, because I'm frustrated that we're going to be able to get this done, because it just seems to be we keep approving money. We are approving stuff, and it's not getting done, or it's not getting done right. I don't know if that's true or not, but I just want to say that how can you help us?
Well, I guess partly I can insert myself, but the reality is you should be utilizing, like you have an engineer on board who can really manage a project very well. The other thing, there's other nonprofit organizations that can provide some assistance with, they're not going to manage a project for it, but you can give us some guidance. Like we've got RCAP Solutions. Can assist, and Granite State Rural Water is another. But the thing is, you should rely on the engineer because the commissioners can't do everything. Okay, and I think that to me is the relying on professional services is probably my best recommendation. And I go back to there's been a lot of people. I mean, I don't know if they hear. Some people hear something may not be. People here have said, oh, I can do this and do that, okay, related to the water system. The commissioners, first of all, should not be employed to do something on the water system. You got to just be separate. And then there's people, residents within, who said, I can do some things. If they don't do it professionally for a living, let them step away and bring in the professionals to do something, and they'll be doing it right, and the liability is on them. Okay, so.
Diana Dolan, like Kathy had mentioned earlier, the people that live here don't have a lot of knowledge about the water system. And it would be really nice to have really basic understanding of the water system, that a visual to tell us, okay, where the tanks are, where the wells are, what you want done. So we know what's going on.
I mean, maybe they should have an information session sometime. But the issues I see when people have that is not everybody comes to it. Right. Okay. And then you get to a warrant, you get to the annual meeting, and you're voting on something. Part of that vote is relying on that you trust the managers, the system too. When people go to an annual meeting for towns, they're not getting into the details that much. They just, okay, the selectman recommends something, and the finance committee recommends it. Most of the time, it passes, things like that. So part of it is, relying on the commissioners as to manage the utility. So I mean, it's a good idea. I think having a visual. there's a little visual here that I'm looking at. Yeah, I understand it, but I'm sure a lot of people may not understand it if they're not involved.
It would probably take a couple series of. It is a very old and complex system. Not to try to make it, it is hard to kind of simplify at times. But I think that specific projects could probably be visualized better. But it is, as you can see, we planned on like a 2-hour meeting today, and just going over tanks has taken 2 hours. So, it is hard to kind of pass along what's needed if it's not something that someone does deal with all the time. But
one of the things I think is that the meetings, and again, I haven't mentioned this to commissions, but they meet during the daytime, right?
Yes.
Do they ever meet at night?
No.
Okay.
Or on the weekends, they refuse.
Well, okay, then maybe there's something that maybe they consider is that maybe once, I don't know how often you meet, but
Weekly.
okay, maybe once a month there's a nighttime meeting.
We've been asking it for 6 months.
Okay, all right. You heard it, right, guys?
6 months we've been asking for weekends once a month or an evening.
So, right.
Did you hear Rick's suggestion? I'm not going to do it. Are you going to do it? No, you're not going to do it. You just said he recommends it. You're not going to do it?
Let's get back to what we're talking about.
I'm just asking if you're going to follow his recommendations so we can get this project
Right.
done. Now you
Much of that is described on the schedule. We don't have to spend a lot of time on it. To Paula's point, we're pointing out an option on this. So we have not made a decision on it. We have a column that says recommendation. We're recommending replacement because over the long term it's less costly. Adds longevity to the tax. So it's not a dramatic change, it's a matter of the fact that we are offering an option. And that to be continued with the lining, if the voters deal with that, or consider that as the most viable thing. It is a cost reduction. You can see that on the last column, last page, that there is a $50,000 difference, approximately $50,000 difference. So if you want to be conservative on the cost elements, we can continue with the line. The schedule is going to be disrupted by the write-off tanks because we're going to be consumed over the next year dealing with that particular tank. So that many of these tanks will be deferred for a year or thereabouts or later as a result of our schedule being consumed by the write-off tank replacement. So simple as that. As far as the funding, it's a matter of the whole funding package needs to be looked at in terms of the write-off tank replacement as well as these. There was a $205,000 warrant article that still exists. Whether or not we modify that or whatever is something to be done at a near-term date. So we'll be working on the financing alternatives, dealing with those particular issues, and looking at the schedule as to what is feasible as a result of the write-off tank replacement.
I would say something before we start. You take your, it says Chikora, look at your calculator. Mine starts with Chikora, pretty young child. on Muddy Beach. Look at the package, and go to the last page. Look this. It says cost analysis summary. You got your Corolla. A new tank is $32,000 complete. Almost $33,000 inspection line, $27,000. The difference is $5,000 to buy a new tank versus extending it. If you inspect it and line it, and you're only going to get 20 years out of it. This is what this analysis is showing you when we did it. Same thing with Young Trout and Muddy Beach. We have no option on Muddy Beach. Muddy Beach has to be replaced. It's a boom. So that one kind of speaks for itself. The other two, it shows you the difference. One is $8,800. You can get 50 years out of it. That's what the $8,800 buys you.
Is it a steel tank or a concrete tank?
It's a steel. These are small 5,000-gallon tanks.
Won't that have to be lined?
They come lined, and then every 5 years afterwards. If you want to spend more money, we can go find a concrete tank to spend more money. But this is showing you the difference between the 20-year line, inspecting line, versus a 50-year, go with a new tank and maintain it every 5 years like it should. This is what this cost analysis is showing. That's why we jumped out of it. Inspecting and lining the small tanks, because it didn't prove to us to be worthwhile over the long term. Go ahead.
With regards to the 5,000-gallon tanks, I guess my question is either for Chuck Engineering or in your analysis, better detail. Are those properly sized? I know they're what's called mid-station storage for boosting the water up the hill, but are those properly sized? Did you get an analysis of that? And then secondly, I'm wondering if Chuck can explain why we want to take 10,000 gallons of storage, that tank here right behind us, out of service. We're just basically going to let it rot and die and take that out of service.
Let's stay on the 5,000 first.
Correct. So for the 5,000s, are they properly sized with regards to storage capacity and the need for the future growth of the district?
We never sized. This is total replacement of the tanks.
Oh, just like you didn't question the...
No, I mean, you might not have one, but Young probably do without building something else.
Right, right.
I'm at the 5,000 building.
So I just want to play back what I heard you both say, which was in this year's bond, money was approved to line all the tanks. After doing an analysis and understanding the difference between lining costs and replacement costs, the commissioners have decided to no longer just put a pause on spending any additional money on lining and propose back to the legislative body next year the replacement of the tanks, basically not spending any more money, going back to the legislative body and saying we'd like to have the legislative body consider the replacement of the tanks. That's what I think I just heard you say. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Why wasn't that done last year? I don't understand. I don't understand why that analysis wasn't done before. The
Analysis was done just before the annual meeting.
Why wasn't that proposed at the annual meeting?
I think we brought it up at the annual meeting, but it was skipped by at the end.
Yeah, but it wasn't in the warrant article was approved to do it the way it proposed. And now, yeah, I remember it, 11/15, you came forward and said you're working on this, and the point was, well, why didn't you propose it then?
I think it was just being done.
The annual meeting moderator shut us down.
Oh,
That's
stop
just- I will not stop.
He did. He lost 2 minutes. Let's be factual here. Go ahead.
My question is, if the concrete tanks are cheaper up here, why would they not be cheaper down there?
Right.
For the smaller tanks?
I haven't priced out concrete tanks. I just took the steel tanks and put this analysis.
Right, but we...
I can do a concrete tank.
Well, if we're looking at the cost of replacing them,
Yeah, right.
and the price is so much closer, and up here, the concrete tanks are actually cheaper. I think it would be worth a look.
It wouldn't be, I think that what they were trying to do was compare apples to apples, mining 5,000, replacing 5,000 steel. I agree, we ought to look into siding and concrete if it's something that we decide to move forward with.
Issue that concrete lasts longer.
Exactly. You will run into the smaller the tank, essentially because of the fact, you have an excavator on site, so what they can do, it's not like a 5-gallon cost-effective thing. So, but I think it's absolutely worth looking into. It was something that people decided to do. We wanted 20,000, size of our lots and things like that would have to be taken into consideration. I think there's quite a bit of legwork that would have to be done. So, but yeah, without a doubt, you want to maybe compare now steel with concrete in this scenario as well.
There might not be room in two places for the standards. That would be Young Pearl and Socorro. Mighty Beach, because that's, we could have gotten up.
Just a comment about the steel. I mean, typically, we don't see concrete tanks at 5,000. No, less than 10,000.
All right, so this cost analysis we're looking at here, you just identified the difference of $5,170, $87.70, and $5,170. Does that include the cost of hookups, excavation work, et cetera, et cetera?
Yes.
It's hard to understand all of it, and I'm trying to listen to the conversation at the same time as going through a spreadsheet. It's not like I had this ahead of time. So does it or does it not?
Yes, it does.
It does. So it's truly only $5,100 more, and it's exactly the same. Okay.
Keep in mind, every year that goes by, you're going to be probably having 3 to 5% escalation costs.
So we're in this predicament now of a warrant article not getting fulfilled because we ended up with getting information at the annual meeting that wasn't the most up-to-date, and then it's presented to us 9 months later as to what the best course of action should have been by 2 commissioners who were the same 2 people preparing for last year's annual meeting, and you wonder why we don't trust what we're getting for information. So we were told bad information then that we voted on. They got the warrant article approved, and they chose not to do it because they had other information that came later. And then when we're asked to become part of the process by a gentleman like yourself who is an expert on this, we're told that they're not going to meet what your suggestions are, which is a weeknight meeting. That's why we lack the trust to get these projects done.
This is nothing but a political statement by you. I'll tell you right now, you can't prove the project that we haven't been successful on water getting done. Point blank.
Point blank?
Yes.
Regarding these smaller tanks, of course, the big ones are #1 priority. You would agree?
Yes.
Okay. These are less of a priority at this point. Probably not all in the same year. It would make sense to push them out into the future. The smaller, the less priority, the less money. It's going to be hard to swallow just a big project for a huge tank. Why should we spend a lot of time on it now with vague numbers when it's going to be in the future? Let's concentrate on what really needs to get done in the next year or 2. And if these aren't going to be done in the next year or 2 because they're a low priority, we can't afford them all. Talking about the details of it now is just wasting all our time.
You got $40,000. Muddy Beach, we don't do them right away.
We're talking about small tanks.
Muddy Beach
They don't seem to have a problem right now.
Muddy Beach is the problem. We took sediment into a pump and jammed up a pump.
That's not the tank's problem. That's
What's
your
the
filtration
sediment
problem.
The what?
You need a sediment filter and the stuff coming out of the well.
It wasn't out of the well, it was out of the tank.
Again, if there's something wrong with the tank because it got sediment in because there wasn't proper filtration, that doesn't make the tank invalid.
The tank is a
You're
big...
going to try to do them over 1 year?
No.
Then let's concentrate on what needs to get done.
If we go back to the CIP that was referenced earlier, when Ralph held it up originally, it shows that the tanks are not intended to be done in 1 year for the 5,000-gallon tanks. But it also shows a potential plan that is being formulated where if the district continues to approve the $20,000 into the tank replacement capital reserve fund on an annual basis, we can do these on an every other year throughout the system and pay for it from those funds as we raise those at $20,000 a year, with an average cost of $40,000 or $39,600 anticipated. So we can fund this out over a course of a number of years, yes. But it was just information to get to everybody here so that there was understanding as to why the lining wasn't being worked on. The lining's not being worked on because this analysis shows that it may not be cost effective and in the best interest of spending the money.
Okay, so back to other people's questions. We're not sure we can trust the analysis. We don't get to participate in it. We don't get to review it. We don't get to understand where the estimates come from.
It's all right here.
And it's in the future, and it's a lower priority.
This has been out since, it was done with the asset management review, so this is something that should be surprised. This has been kind of...
That doesn't quite stop the questioning of the validity of the numbers and how they derive. That's all. With backup, so that I can look at the backup and say that high-end number has valid quotes, estimates, or whatever that substantiate its validity. I mean, that's what I'd be looking at. And somebody asking the questions of the engineers and the water system guy to make sure we all are on the same page. None of that seems to happen anymore.
Exactly. My suggestion is do a 91A, ask for the tank from Mass Tank, and do an estimate yourself.
I was involved in the Mass Tank project in 2014. I was the one that went to Mass Tank and got the estimates and conferred with all the engineers for hours and hours and got that $96,000 estimate to have all the tanks looked at, inspected, in line. Then we put the $100,000 up. We got that approved by the state. Then we got it approved by the voters, and that was in February. And then Fluid Engineering did what they had to do. The bid package came out way too late. It came out in the fall. So we had from September to the fall with nothing going on. Meanwhile, Mass Tank is calling me saying, we can start in May. And they put it on hold. They said, we're not going to start in September. So that whole year went by with nothing. Then the bid package came out 4 weeks before we had to have all the information for the annual meeting. Mass Tank was the only company that showed up for the bid process meeting. I was there at the meeting. I was the only commissioner at the meeting. They had a lot of questions. The bid package became so thick, they had to send it to their legal department, which took 2 to 3 weeks. Now they had 1 week left to do the real bid. And then when they saw all the boilerplate that was put into that bid package, the legal department said, you know, we're doing Budweiser, we're doing Coca-Cola. They don't hit us with these types of specifications. That's why they don't bid. Not enough time and too much boilerplate that they had to address. In that bid package. That's the truth. That's what happened with Mass Tank, and there was no time left to react. And they said they came back with a no bid.
So the farm team was protecting the village district.
The specs went overboard. Mass Tank didn't get specs like that from Coca-Cola, Budweiser down in Merrimack, and all the other big tank projects they do. Except they got it from Idolice, which is their smallest customer. So I just wanted to say that because a lot of people wondering why it was no bid. And I went to the after bid meeting with them to find out why they no bid it, and they laid it all out on me. And told me why. You guys didn't show up at the meeting. I was the only one showing up at those meetings.
I want to pose it, he's got to get Rick's got to get
Just a quick question, just to clarify some numbers. So currently, the current bid for the tank lining of these smaller tanks is $27,700. Is that correct? Is that the number? I'm looking at your numbers. If you decided to keep going forward, it would be $27,000 to reline, right?
Yeah.
The warrant article approved $20,600, which was the best guess at the time. I'm looking at the warrant article line here. What was approved to reline these tanks, in fact, was $20,800. Is that correct? I'm looking at your original, what was approved by the warrant, by the taxpayers. This year.
That's what we don't have. That's what we don't have.
All right, so we approved 20, so at the best, in February, the best guess we had to inspect and reline these smaller tanks was $20,800, which had a 20% contingency built into it. Now, and that was the best guess, now the actual number is coming in at 27.7, which is 35% higher than the best guess we had 7 months ago. And I guess it goes back to the question asked much earlier, and I don't want to cast aspersion on Juan King, but I'm just, how do we even trust any numbers we get as ballparks from our experts when we're off by 35%?
What column are you looking at?
I'm looking at column 1, which is
the warrant article, we
Yeah,
approved.
and column, the third column over, look at those numbers.
Right. So, right.
The numbers, young crowd, inspection of lining, the numbers are identical.
Right.
Yeah.
But the actual number now you're getting is 27.7, which is the number you're using to say we should replace instead of inspecting and lining. Right.
What you have to do is add, there's a $20,000 last line item, tank servicing. You have to allocate that to all of them. That's Ian's work to connect.
But why wouldn't that have been in the original warrant article?
It was.
Why isn't it listed on the spreadsheet then? It's part of the code.
Look at the last page. See, when you guys put together the numbers, you omitted them. That's why there's a difference between 2005 and 2018. I think you guys dropped that out. Because it wasn't, the 2005 wasn't our number. It was put together on the floor, or from, I think Jay was the one who put it forward. So these numbers aren't our numbers. They are to the extent that it's the best estimate that we had at the time. But there is little variation in any of this. There isn't much variation at all. What you're quoting is a problem because the 20,000, if you look at completed, there's 3,461 in tank servicing. It's a bucket because he does, he's doing 3 tanks at a time, building all that. So the variation doesn't exist.
Okay. I think I understand.
So you can trust us on that?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. I'm going to end this meeting. Rick's got to get out of it. Rick, thanks very much for coming.
I think you want to speed it along a little bit.
No, he's got one other thing.
I guess, I mean, I don't want to delay people, but I just, from my perspective here, from what we're responsible for, we're responsible for providing safe and drinking water for all the residents in the state. I look at our role as a regulatory, but primarily I describe it as we're walking hand in hand. I like to describe it as we're walking hand in hand with utilities down this path of providing clean water to everybody. In fact, we're working as a team. Sometimes we have to drag people kicking and screaming down the path, but we're doing it together, all right? Obviously, I don't see people here, I mean, this group doing it together at all, from what I've heard today, all right? So, I'm not pointing the finger at anybody, but I think everyone should take the blame. You have no clue of what's ahead of you here in the next 10 years. You have water that you're wasting every single day in the wintertime. There's been no mention about replacing the water main and the bleeders that's been going on. That's something that should be done. But now you get a crisis with the storage tanks, and it is a crisis. And the other thing is that you're going to be spending over $1 million here within 5 to 10 years. So to be talking about, well, if something's 20,000 or 27,000, that is peanuts, okay? And you're wasting your time. You got to look at the big picture, and whether someone should go out, the commissioners should spend time going out and soliciting engineering firms, okay, for pricing. That's time, and I don't think they have. I mean, but at the same time, the specifications are going to be more stringent than they were before that. Okay, you think those are bad specs? Any funding source you use, whether it's SRF or federal funding, the specifications are greater now. So it's not, this isn't a go talk to your buddy or a neighbor who has something. This is publicly bid, and it's going to be well documented. So, we're talking major dollars here. There's been so much time spent about, what's been done in the past and things. I get it. To what level of service do you expect to be provided by your water system and the commissions? And I describe it as, I live in Concord, which is a pretty big, large utility. So if I was out of water once a year, would that be acceptable to me? And I say, well, yeah, okay, as long as it wasn't on Christmas Day when I had all my family, or Thanksgiving, all right? All right? But then now it changed that to, what if I was out of water once a month? Is that acceptable? I would say no, right? So somewhere in between that is what is your level of service. So if you came up on a Friday night, do you expect water to be available? Yeah, okay, well, once a year, or you know, every other week, okay? So there's a level of service that you're expecting, and you want to convey that to the commissioners, then that translates into what it costs to operate the water system. So whether you're in the house 1 day a year or 365 days, there's a cost associated with operating that water system and having that water available to you at your doorstep, whether you use a gallon or not. So you think about this, so what that translates into, your water cost is going to go up. Now, how much, I don't know, but it's definitely going to go up. And it's something to recognize, and I hopefully you can support, the efforts that are going forward here. I'm not going to, I'm willing to continue on, concerning myself, but I'm not going to come every week or every meeting and listen to the stuff that's gone on, okay, like this. I just think it's, I don't think it's right, And so, I think, there are some things I can, and it's not intended as a threat, but more as a, if something doesn't happen, then the state will come back and we will do enforcement, and the path will be laid out, and there'll be no discussions. It'll be, you're going to do this, and this is when you're going to do it, and, and pony up the money. As far as the financing goes, we're very familiar with the financing options that are available to communities like this, so there's a discussion to be had about that. One of the things I would suggest is that, maybe there's a lot of different areas that, like there's a technical side, there's a financing side, there's a public relations side, and maybe what the commissioners do, they divvy those duties up, and then maybe they do solicit a couple of people from the district to help them. And someone listens to the financing, all right, what's available, okay? But it's hard for just 2 or 3 people to absorb and to digest and evaluate everything. It's just not enough time.
They said they didn't need a third person and they shut down the communications committee.
Well, again, it's just, I think everyone is frustrated here, so. But there is the things that have to be done, and I'm not sure. I think that the storage tank is replacing the Reinhardt tank is probably the most important thing. And there's so many other issues I can talk about, but at some point you're going to have to replace the water main in those where the blow-offs are. How much do you think that's going to cost per foot? $250 a foot. Yeah. So that's something that's going to have to be done at some point in time, but. But again, I think this is good that everybody came out, and I'm available, to contact afterwards too. I think hopefully people, the commissioners have my contact information, But what I would suggest is at some point in the next couple months is to say, come back, have a. Okay, what plan of what are we going forward with? And there's some, and different tasks addressing different things. There's a storage tank issue, what you want to do with the PRVs is another issue, and then, and some of these things will hopefully come back together before the annual meeting, and then there'll be a full presentation to the members of the annual meeting. But it's been very frustrating for me.
And us.
Yeah, I get it. So.
Thank you, Rick.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.